Okay. All right. I think we're live. Hello, everyone. Morgan here. It's like you guys are introducing yourselves already in the chat. Okay. So today I am joined by Brian and Dale. They run a podcast. I'm actually going to websites, things like that. I'm going to let you guys explain all that. You know exactly what's going on with your stuff, but I want you to, just in case anybody doesn't know you, although you guys do so many live shows, so many shows. So go ahead and tell everybody more about you.
You want to start, Brian?
No, go ahead, Dale. You got it.
All right. We do the Survival Preppers YouTube channel, and we decided to do that because we had been doing our own preparedness podcasts and websites for quite a while. I'm over a decade. I think Brian's pretty close to that. And then we decided we kind of met up. We did this thing called the Preparedness Experience, which kind of flopped, but it was a lot of fun. And then we decided to go ahead and do this, where we basically get on our YouTube channel and just kind of go for it. Basically, it's a lot of preparedness stuff, but it's a lot of around the edges stuff too. So it's kind of, we decided we wanted to, instead of just talking about the basics of preparedness, kind of have a lot more fun with it. And we do get kind of live over there. So if anybody hasn't watched our shows, just be prepared. It is not rated G. I'll put it that way, or maybe even PG. But I've also got my Survivalist Prepper YouTube channel, website, and that podcast, which I haven't been doing a lot of. And then I'll let Brian explain what he's got going on.
Yeah. So Dale actually got me into all the podcasting stuff. I was a prepper from the 80s. A buddy of mine, my dad was a survivalist, got me into it. And so I went down that road. And then, in early 2000s, like, oh, what's this prepper stuff? Oh, they're survivalists, but they're called preppers now. Okay, this is cool. So I started listening to podcasts. I was over in Baghdad, actually. It's the first time I listened to podcasts. And I think Dale's probably the first podcast I ever listened to. And that goes back probably 10, 11 years now. And so I got started into a bunch of episodes over at mindforsurvival.com. We were doing the blog and all that. And I think sometime, I don't know, man, it was sometime when coronavirus first started going, we just kind of both hit the wall on talking about, the basic preparedness stuff, EMPs and the bug out bags and all that. And it's still fun to talk about. Well, so we both kind of pulled back on our podcasts and even somewhat on our websites. But we would talk like once or twice a week. We'd get on the phone and rant. No, look what they're doing here and look what they're doing. They're probably like everybody that's watching this right now does with their friends, right? So finally, one day I was talking with Dale. I'm like, we do this like twice a week where we spend hours on the phone talking about this stuff. Why don't we just throw it up on YouTube and do a YouTube live and do it there? And so we started doing the survival preppers. And I think we had you on way back when, Morgan. And and so
I was going to ask you, I think it was a year ago.
Yeah, year and a half ago. And so, we still, we're chugging just like you. We're chugging through things and we're battling against we know we get shadow banned and all this different stuff. So just doing that, but we have fun doing it. And so, like Dale says, our podcasts are very G-rated. My website's very G-rated, not political. And we take care of all of that venting over on the Survival Prepper. So if I have a sailor mouth normally, I tone it down for nice shows and for my podcast. But over there, I don't even know if it's a sailor mouth. I was a ranger, so I think it's more of a ranger mouth. But yeah, it's fun. So that's where we're at.
I love y'all's just kind of unfiltered, podcasts. Like you guys come on and you like feed off of each other and you're just like, just going at it. And I love it. And, I think we need more stuff like that. That's just fun and, stuff that we can all, talk about and, it's not so like stiff. But I had a blast being on y'all's show. And I get your newsletter every week, Brian. So
that's still one of the favorite shows we did. It was just a good time. It was fun, and that's one of my favorites. It's cool to sometimes you get those people on your shows that just it's like pulling teeth, to get them to talk and talk about preparedness and all that stuff, and then sometimes it just flows, and that's kind of how your show was just hit record and go for it and see what happens. That's kind of our show in a nutshell.
And that's why I wanted to get you guys on, because I knew that you guys have a lot to talk about always. So, we will be answering questions. Somebody asked, are y'all going to be answering questions? Yes, absolutely. If you have a question, just try to make it like in all caps so that we can see it, because I miss it. And so, if so, what do you think about the 70 empty shelf theory? So Miss Stray Cat asked, what is this 70 empty shelf theory? I don't know. I actually haven't heard of this. Let's see. I'm going to look it up right now. 70 empty shelf. You guys watch me talk to myself as I do this. 70.
You'd think that we'd know, being especially me and Brian being the conspiracy theorists we are.
I'm glad you asked that question, because I'm looking it up now. It's like, all right, we have something new to talk about.
Yeah, the 70 empty shelf theory. Should I guess while you guys are looking this up and make myself look like a fool?
Yes, please. Guess. Make yourself look like a fool so we have time.
I think it's some deliberate action where they want to make sure each store has 70 empty shelves or 70 products that are low in stock or something like that. I have no idea.
I'm guessing that whatever's behind it, it probably isn't good with the way things have been going lately.
It doesn't sound great. All I'm seeing is it a 70% empty shelves? Because that's what I'm seeing some stuff.
Linda said the shelves will be empty in 70 days. I believe that, actually.
Oh. And
it's kind of interesting, because if you're searching Google or even DuckDuckGo these days, you're probly not going to get that, because they're not going to feed you that.
Where'd you see that?
Linda just put it in the chat.
Got it. Shelves will be empty in 70 days. 70 days from today. I want to know when. I got to be prepared, right?
Man, I need to start planting some more stuff.
I know.
You got to find some 70-day plants.
I'm not prepared.
I'll tell you what, 70 days after all the stuff, just even this last week, the stuff that's going on, the stock market, like the last 2 days, and you hear all the stuff about the fertilizer. I mean, all of this stuff going on. 70 days, you know, a lot of people may say, oh, that's those crazy preppers talking or whatever. I don't think that's that far-fetched, honestly. I mean, I'm pretty concerned recently, more concerned than I have been going into this. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it all evens out and we're all okay. But I'll tell you what, there's a lot of things going on that make me think that this could get really tough here in the next few months. So
let's see. My husband was telling me that there was a food shortage in the 70s, 70, 71, I think, something like that. Anyway, it was about 10% food shortage. And what was the population in the 70s? Like the whole population. Let's see. Population in the U.S.
Oh, what was it? 200 million, 250 million?
You need an assistant, Morgan.
Yes, I do. I was looking stuff up, and I feel like I'm ignoring everybody. See, about 203 million.
Yeah.
So 203 million, and then what's the population now?
330, just over 330 million people now in the U.S.
In the United States. Okay. So 130 more, 130 million more people now. That was a 10% of food shortage then, and they're predicting a 30% food shortage now.
Yeah. Yep.
And that makes sense. And unfortunately, that is really, really bad news for everybody. So,
it's really bad news. We were talking about it last night on our show, and you know, as bad as we may have it, or we may have it, there's going to be countries, you know, in Africa and other places that just get that. They have set up this make-believe system where everything is leveraged to get everybody fed. And as soon as you have a little clink in that system, everything starts. It's like the just-in-time stuff with having 3 days of supplies in a grocery store.
Yeah.
If you have something happen, okay, in 3 days, technically, you're pretty much done. Well, I think we're running into that now. And I don't know if the 70 days is going to hit. But what I do know, and it's one of the few things I believe that President Biden put out, was that in March, he said there are going to be really bad food shortages at the end of the year.
Yeah.
And person after person that, normally I would go, you're full of it, are all coming out and saying, we're going to have really bad food shortages. So when I pair that up with what I see on the shelves, and what we've seen on the shelves since the pandemic, I know someone in the chat mentioned something about that they aren't seeing that. And James mentioned that he's in Michigan and he's seen the stocks go up. I hope that's true, because I know I spend a lot of time up in Michigan. And I saw the stocks going down, and in the past year, I've been in Michigan, California, Nevada, Arizona. I've traveled all over just like you. And everywhere I go, I love wandering the grocery stores.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wander up and down the aisles, and I look at the holes, and the holes in the shelves have slowly gotten bigger. The prices are going up. I read an article the other day about shrinkflation. Like I think it's 6 less sheets of toilet paper on each roll now.
Yeah.
You know,
shrinkflation, yeah.
Yeah, so you have shrinkflation. You're getting less at the same time that the prices of everything are going up. I think industry has stretched their ability to do as much shrinking as they can and trying to maintain their profit margins. So now they're starting to squeal because they're not. It's harder to gouge us. Mm-hmm. No, I think we're in for a really rough time. Again, I don't know if it's 70 days, but I would plan sometime in the next 6 months that we have really bad food problems. Definitely.
Yeah, it seems realistic, especially with everything. I mean, these things just keep popping up, and then like I'm sure you guys have talked on the show, the food manufacturing plants and all these that are on fire and all. You know, there was a new one today. I just saw it in my Instagram stories. I can't remember exactly where it was, but yeah. So like all these things, it seems really coincidental. You know, but outside of, you know, let's say there's some big conspiracy to take our food away, right? But there's also Mother Nature that's we're contending with as well, with the extreme heat, flooding, all these things that are happening to our crops that are producing less things. Like it's a whole thing. And so Australia right now is actually feeling it pretty hard. I was just reading an article here. I think I saw somewhere that it was like $11 for a head of lettuce. Lettuce is being hit hard. Like they had apparently a double whammy of things they had an extreme flood, and then that damaged a bunch of crops, and then they couldn't plant anymore because of that extreme flood. And then they had one of the coldest winters in decades. So that hindered things as well. And so there's a lot of things that aren't in the grocery stores right now, but there's still a lot of things that are, like they say that there's plenty of apples and pears and grapes and things like that, but there's just not like a lot of certain veggies and things like that. So what else did I see? Yeah. So
well, you know, we talk about it. We talk about it as in a complex disaster, right? And you can and you can either buy into the theory that people are burning down food processing plants in different places, or you can say that they're just random. Regardless of which way you look at it, it's still happening. Yeah. You know, and so you have that happening. Dale, I think it was a month ago, he had a snowstorm. He lives right kind of on the edge of Colorado where, you know, all the corn and all the wheat and all that stuff starts. So they had a foot of snow. So you have crops that here in almost June, late May, we're getting hammered with snow. And so it's one thing, like you said, with Australia, they have had floods, record cooling, whatever. I'm down in Georgia right now, and it's 99 degrees and over 100 on the heat index. And we're expecting over 100 and something degrees next month. It's hot. You know, you got the crops are all in, but there's so many different problems that are happening right now. Even if none of them were ever planned, the system would have a hard time dealing with what's happening.
Yeah. So then we have things like this where the truckers can't afford fuel to deliver stock. It's not just the truckers, like, okay, so it's a whole system, you know, like the warehouse, the nature, you know, and then it's the fuel, it's getting places, it's all these things. It's the labor. There's a huge labor shortage right now across the board. Everybody has a labor shortage. Let's see.
But job numbers are great.
Yeah, right. I could throw a literal rock and have a job within an hour. I mean, like, people are begging for people to work. Mm-hmm. And I had a couple people ask me today, well, what do you think it is? I don't know. Like, I honestly don't know. I don't have any explanation.
I think some of it may be when everything was shut down, up until they did the lockdowns. Our society, especially from moving from the 80s into the 90s and 2000s, people were just grinding. It went, you know, where people would go in and work tons of hours. I was a corporate exec for a while. And you go in, I'd work 60, 80 hours a week. And it was just what everybody did. I think in my mind, at least my crazy philosophy or thought on it is when they shut everything down, and everybody got home and they started hanging out with their family. And there was some rough patches where, oh, look at the arguments are going up. Well, I think any of those relationships that were already struggling, when they pressure tested them by putting them in the house, like, you're going to have problems. But I think a lot of people realized, like, wow, I actually enjoy cooking out in the backyard and like hanging out with the kids. And then when it comes back to going back in the workplace, I think a lot of people are like, I'm not ready to make that move yet. And now you've transitioned to where so many people are like, what's the point of going back in to get the same pay? I got to pay in gas and I have all these constraints. So either way it's working out. I think it's a difficult, sale for a lot of people to go back in and work.
Yeah. Along with the truckers. Sorry, I'll just hold up your hand if you want to speak there. One more thing. I read this article where this was at the beginning of like gas prices rising like a couple months ago. He lives in California, and he was able to pay all his bills, and he was living on just beans and rice literally every single day. He could not afford anything else. He couldn't even afford the gas to get to and from his work. And he's like, what do I do? Like, I literally don't have money. Like, I'm scraping by. I've canceled things. Like, I don't have any subscription. I don't have any entertainment. I don't have any of this. And I'm doing the bare minimum of everything, beans and rice. What do I do? Like people just literally are unable to get by with what's happening. And so, yeah.
Hey, Stray Cat had a comment in there, and I wanted to touch on that because he was talking about kind of what you guys, or they were talking about, kind of what you guys were talking about a minute ago. I said, how much longer do you think we have before absolute panic, either nation or worldwide, kind of sets in? And you guys were talking about how, I think, how do I phrase this without going too off the deep end conspiracy theory? You guys were talking about how the whole why this is happening is interesting, and it's important, but the more important part is that it's happening. And I think as preppers, we kind of have this foresight, and we kind of see this stuff coming down the pipe. The average person, though, I think has this mentality because everything kind of gets bad and then it gets better, and they have this dependency on the government and all this. So I don't think it really registers to a lot of people how bad this could actually get. Because everything bounces back in our lifetimes here in the United States. Everything always bounces back. It always gets better. So if this gets that bad, I think you could see kind of like the toilet paper shortage during the pandemic, stuff like that, where people start to lose it a little bit, and all of a sudden there's runs on the stores and there's even more shortages and all that. So I don't think it would take much. It's kind of, people are kind of like the stock market, right? Like the stock market crashing today, everybody else sees the numbers going down and everybody starts selling. People start hearing this stuff on the news, and they're going to be attacking the grocery stores and doing all that stuff. So that's why it's important for us to stay away from all that. Have that stuff in our house. Brian mentioned gardening earlier too. That's another way to fight it.
Yeah. Gardening, buying extra food when you go to the store, get your few extra cans and stretch that. Don't go into debt right now. Definitely don't go into debt to get ahead on this stuff, because if the economy bottoms out and you have a bunch of, you can go into debt then, well, maybe that's something to think about. But right now I wouldn't go into debt because, the cost of everything's going up. The last thing you need to pay is pay some bank a bunch of interest rate.
Yeah.
When that could be going towards feeding your family. So be smart and have a plan. But I would get ahead of it. I sometimes feel that I've never been the doom and gloomer. I've never said, when I was 18 and I got into preparedness, I would hear my buddy's dad and all his friends talk about, like this thing that's happening, it's the end of us. This thing that's, every time I turned around, every 6 months or a year, it was like the end of us.
Right.
Well, I don't know that any of this can be the end of us, but I don't know that it's not going to be a rough road, because like what we talk about over on the Survival Preppers is I don't see anybody doing anything that's positive to change what's happening. So if you're not a prepper now, I don't know what could make you. I don't know anything that we could say would make you become a prepper right now.
Right.
Yeah.
I totally agree.
On that going into debt, though, I don't know. That's kind of that's a tricky one for me, because I'm conflicted on that. And granted, I mean, it's never a good idea to go in debt. I'm not saying that, but with the food prices going up, the value of your dollar going down and all that, we talked about this on our show a few weeks ago about how I got a freezer and buying a whole bunch of meat and getting this stuff, buying gas, filling up all my gas cans while the prices are lower, because eventually they're going to get higher. So it's kind of like gambling. You buy it now and hopefully you save more later, but at the same time, you still have to be able to pay your public service, and that's going to be going up. So it's a tough one. Sorry, my phone's going off.
It is tough, like I always say the same thing, like, try to get out of debt. But, Dale's making a really good point. I think that, you got to look really hard at your personal finances. If you can go into a little bit of debt and pay it off pretty quick, like that's no big deal. But if, I get a lot of questions like this, should I get into debt? And I always say, well, that's a personal choice, because I can't tell you, yes, absolutely, get into debt, because that could ruin you. The apocalypse may or may never happen. You still have to live
right.
Period. And
yeah, Brian talked about that last night. He got a comment on his website, somebody talking about hyperinflation. You're not going to have to worry about it. And I'll let you go into that, Brian, but it's like, well, what if it doesn't happen?
Yes.
Then you're hosed.
I wrote a post on how to prepare for hyperinflation. I'm really happy because my big thing is it's beating Forbes on Google's rankings right now, if you like Google. So I'm kind of happy about look at that, a prepper's beating Forbes. So anyhow, someone put in the comments on it though, like because I say, hey, get your debt paid off. And they're like, you shouldn't pay off your debt because it's going to be inflationary dollars and the dollars are worth less. But I'm like, as the dollars become worth less, you're paying more for groceries at some point. If you're unfortunate enough to have to make that decision, becomes paying your debt or buying your groceries. If you never get to that point, it's better. And because I've had 2 times in my life where I've bailed myself out of, I was broke. I'd run up all my credit cards. And the last time I'm like, oh, I'm not doing that again. Mm-hmm. And I found as soon as I cracked the seal on using a credit card, you run up a little bit of debt. And then the next time, all of a sudden something comes out like the transmission, or you have a problem that, I need to use it. Now you're even that much farther behind. So I don't watch a lot of Dave Ramsey, but I really kind of like that stuff I hear out of Dave Ramsey and how he approaches it. So it's kind of my thoughts.
Credit cards are just fake money, right? It's free money. Isn't that the American way?
Yes. You're 18, you get a whole bunch of free money in the mail. Look at these cards. I can spend. Okay, so this was a previous about the labor shortages. Many people retired early. I did hear about that. And then a lot of people choosing to homeschool their kids and cannot afford to pay daycare. I did hear a lot about that, but I've also heard a lot of people putting their kids back in school. So I don't know. I think that there's a lot of online remote positions available now too. Like, why go work at a pizza place when I could just go do some online remote jobs, or I can go drive for Uber, or do these things that I don't have to go into a normal, 9 to 5 or pizza joint, fast food or whatever. If I have these other skills. So there's a lot of opportunities available out there. And I think so much remote opportunities opened up because of COVID. And yeah, like you were saying earlier, I don't want to go back. Nobody wants to go back in the office. Why? It doesn't make any sense for a lot of jobs. But.
Well, and to my grandfather, he retired from I grew up in I grew up in Los Angeles, and my grandfather retired from an aircraft manufacturing plant. Like, got the job back in World War II, manufactured landing gears his whole life. That's what he worked on. And when he graduated, or not graduated, when he retired, it was like a big deal. The company literally gave him the gold watch kind of thing. They had they made all big, because everybody had worked there. They would plan to have them as part of their family kind of thing, right? It's like you went to work for that company for life. Right. And when you went into the 80s and 90s, where I like to talk about the movie Pretty Woman. Everybody's like, it's such a great movie, and I'm like, it's about a really rich dude with a woman who is selling herself because she needs the money, and that really rich dude buys companies and lays off thousands of people to make money off it for a living. I'm like, it's a horrible movie. But when you had that happen in the 80s and 90s, where hedge funds went in and bought everything, that the whole corporate world turned into a disloyal world. And I was fortunate when my first corporate job was a military-centric hierarchy where they had...
I think we lost you, Brian. It says.
Oh, good. I thought it was just me. I was like,
No, it says, I'm trying to unmute you, but it says, can't unmute. There we go.
All right. Sorry about that. My power just went out here. Oh. so I'm on battery power right now. That battery backup stuff, Dale. It's so anyhow, I think we've gone to where in the 80s and 90s, companies got away from being loyal to their employees. When I first went to corporate America, about 3 months after I was there, the company was sold. And the first thing the new CEO did was walk in and, like, on his first day, fire 80 or remove 80 positions. So I think a lot of people are like, why do I want to go back in and be subjected to companies that don't take me, that don't really care about me? I'm just a cog in a wheel when I can stay home and feel, rewarded. I'm not saying that's the right move, but I think that's part of it.
Be closer to your family, not have to put on pants if you don't want to. I mean, it's totally up to you,
Yeah.
Okay, hold on a second. Your power just went out and you're just like,
It happens all the time, a lot of times, especially because what it is my AC unit it's not keeping up with the heat today. So when it gets to a certain point, it shuts down. So I'm just used to sitting here and sweating and going with it. So
okay. That sucks. Okay, so there are a few other questions here. I'm sorry. You want to say something, Dale?
You're probably going to the same. Are you going to put up a comment from Uncle Charlie? Oh, Knight Rider. Oh, well, I'll get to him after you do yours.
I'm kind of behind here. I'm trying to get up here. If our preps are good, what should we invest in next? My IRA is already taken a hit. I have no advice here, quite honest. Because of the way the stocks are going, the way that we're seeing it. One of our friends said that he wanted to retire early, I think this year or next, and they had this whole plan with stocks and everything was going really good. And then all of a sudden, the stocks took a hit and he lost like 50% of everything. And so now he's like, now I can't retire early. And so now I just, and he's all, he's super bummed about it. And so I don't know. I don't have any advice. Bad news.
Well, kind of what you were just talking about, though, and we talk about this all the time as far as the gold and silver and all of that stuff. Mm-hmm. If all of your preps are taken care of, I always talk about gold and silver as that secondary thing. The food is first and foremost. That's what you're going to use on a daily basis and what you need to survive. If you've got to the point where you feel pretty comfortable, I think that would be where I would go, because with the markets going the way they are and all that stuff, you just never know. But those consumables, I think, are the most important. And that kind of goes into what Uncle Charlie was saying earlier about paying off your house. If you don't have to pay a mortgage, you're set, because you do have that free income. We spend other than mortgage, most of our income and our monthly expenses go to food. So that's going to be, especially with the way things are going now, that's going to be where most of our money goes. So I think if your preps are good, Knight Rider, kudos to you for being in that position. I think if I were, that's where I would be focusing on. Maybe, some defense stuff, because who knows how this stuff's going. And again, I don't want to go down that conspiracy rabbit hole too much, but and then that gold and silver, I think I would definitely be paying attention to. Yeah.
I'm wondering what your preps looking good looks like, because I don't think my preps ever look good.
Yeah.
I really want to know what that looks like. But yeah, so okay. Things go belly up. Do you have to pay it back?
I think if they can figure out a way to get it from you, they're gonna. That's my philosophy on it.
And I like to say too, man, one of my thoughts is, again, the problem with the system is the system writes the rules. Right, the government, they write rules for the lobbyists, who corporations and all these people put in there. So I would bank on the side that, well, if you don't have to, it's not to say that you won't have to when it happens,
right? Because
they're doing whatever they can that benefits them. It sometimes pains me, but it's been a little while now. I don't believe our country really tries to do what's right for the people, right? It's what's right for them, and it's what's right for what's going on up at the top. So I always err on the side of caution when it comes to that stuff, or at least try to.
You really got to take care of yourself, period. You can't put your faith that, I'm just not going to have to pay it back because the system failed. They could come after.
Yeah, if it turns out that way, cool.
Yeah,
but
and think about, like, right now they don't mind you walking around owing a ton of debt, because our society changed from a production economy and all this to we're a consumer economy where all we do is consume. So but at one time, and it's in some countries, they have debtor prisons. So it's been there in the past. Doesn't mean it won't be there in the future. I don't know. It's not saying, like, I'm not saying that that's the way we're going, but it's happened. So it's on the books in some form or fashion. So just be careful what you do.
I did want to show this comment really quick. I think that this is interesting because I've heard of this a lot. I've heard of law enforcement in general just like not being able to find anybody to come work for them, and people are leaving like in droves, and it's a big problem these days for them. But this kind of just drives home the fact that nobody's there to come and save you. So
yeah, bad time to be giving up your guns, huh?
a little bit.
Right.
Yeah. Is there a good time?
Well, yeah, but when we're looking at like what's right around the corner, and then all of a sudden you got these yahoos up there talking about banning this and banning that.
Yeah,
I'm gonna hold off on.
Well, and it's interesting why they're talking about all that, right? You have record sales to first-time gun owners, right? So at the time that they're trying to make a grab for guns, more and more people are like, and at the same time that that's happening, there's more and more crime happening.
Yeah.
Like, no,
exactly. Yeah. And I don't think
more and more of them telling us we're on our own.
Yeah, they are. Police themselves even say that. So,
that's Supreme Court said it, right?
Mm-hmm. I did want to say this about labor shortages for older folks with pre-existing conditions that wasn't with the risk to retire before they originally planned with COVID and stuff. So yeah, I get that too, totally. I don't know.
That was a really tough situation.
What did you say?
That was just a tough situation. Were you talking to me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, all of us that are younger than 60 or whatever, kind of I had a hard time with it, all the crap they were pulling. But if you're older than that, yeah, I could totally see where that would factor into your decision making, saying, you know what, it's not worth it to me. Yeah. I'm not putting this weird crap in my body, and I guess if I need to retire, I need to retire. Plus, you couldn't afford to drive to work right now anyway, so costs too much damn money to drive to work. So
exactly.
Liberty Cave made a good comment. Says what changed is we have a currency dictated by fiat, and it is collapsing. And I believe that's 100% true. When they went off the gold standard, all the finagling they did is part of the reason why we kiss so much Saudi butt all the time, and why I think one of the reasons why we don't produce as much oil as we could, because the Saudis agreed to keep the world on the U.S. as the petrodollar. Yeah. Right. And so that's part of the reason. And I think over the years, there's been times where our economy has started to drop because it's based upon fantasy land, and they've manipulated it to get the economy up. And I think what they're at now is they've run out of the ability to turn the dials much and to get things going. And, we can do this to prop the economy up, so much so that they invented modern monetary theory. Right. And they come up with a theory that basically says government should never not spend what the government wants. And if the times get hard on the government, the answer is to pull money out of the economy and the way you do that is through taxation. And let's not forget, inflation is a tax on the working class, on the poor, and all that due to either government inefficiency or government malevolence. So they are pulling money out of the economy, and they're not changing. You don't hear anybody. I just watched, they had something on Fox with Lindsey Graham. Brett Baier was doing a thing with Lindsey Graham, and Bernie had a debate. You never hear anybody. They're both in like the budget committee, but you don't hear them talking about, hey, we need to start operating within a budget.
Right.
And they're not operating. They're still spending like crazy.
Sending money wherever they want.
We're trying to get another multi-trillion-dollar bill through. We're funneling billions of dollars into the military-industrial complex to feed into Ukraine. They don't know where we're giving cash to Ukraine. They don't know where most of that money's going. So they're still continuing down the road. So I think it's gonna hit everybody in the shorts. It's gonna be a really hard time because again, they're not doing anything, and they literally wrote a theory, modern monetary theory, to try to reinforce their narrative. So bad times.
I've been saying it for months. I think all this stuff is intentional. It's going right according to plan.
It just seems like it's not a coincidence. Like it's so incompetent, but it's so like, yes, this makes sense that that they would be planning this. But it's also incompetent. But
like somebody wouldn't say, "Hey, man, should we be doing this?" I mean, this doesn't seem like a good idea to me. Nobody says that.
That I think there are some good-hearted people that want to get into politics and the government because they want to change things, right? But they won't
until they get in there.
Yeah, until they get in there, and they get choked out because none of their ideas will get through. None of them.
No. Well, and that's part of the jinx. I have one of my hashtags when I post on Twitter is F the two-party system.
Oh
right.
yeah.
And we literally have gatekeepers. Like, you have to join their crews to get in there. They've rigged the federal funding of elections and all that to suit those two parties. I think that's one of our biggest hiccups. They're beholding to the establishment, and they're beholding to those parties. When the people used to say, George Soros, you're crazy, that's all conspiracy. World Economic Forum's all conspiracy. But now that they have their website, and the World Economic Forum puts out there the stuff like, hey, by 2030, you'll have nothing and love it. And, and that they have Klaus Schwab actually saying this with the most evil Eastern European German accent that you can muster. Yeah. They're out they know they don't hide this stuff well. So they're just out there and transparent. And for people to call this stuff conspiracies now, I think they're buying into the media hype and living with their head in the sand.
That's what they're hoping. There's so many conspiracies out there, and there are people like us who are talking about it like we're freaking crazy, and they're counting on it. They're counting on the majority of the people just be like, they're crazy. Our society's fine. So.
Yeah. I think that's human nature, though, for a lot of people. And I don't get it, but a lot of people don't want the hardships. They don't want the struggle. They don't want that extra stuff on their plate of having to think about all this stuff. So they just ignore it. And that's why they want bigger government and all that stuff. So they have somebody that is going to, quote unquote, help them when things get bad. Whereas us preppers, we tend to think about things like, like we're talking about now. 70 days in advance and 60 days in advance, 100 days or a year in advance, because we see this stuff coming down the pipe and we're paying attention to it, where a lot of other people are just like, oh, you guys are nuts.
Right.
Well, okay, we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see. So this is a good question. Do normal Walmart vegetable seeds store well? And yeah, they do. Not only do they store well, if you take the seeds out of the vegetables and then you let them dry and you plant them, you'll have vegetables. They're the same as any other seeds. They may be like some vegetables in the store may be hybrids, so you may not be getting the original like thing that you bought in the store or something like that. But very rarely are you going to get something so wildly different or something. A pepper will probably be a pepper. Tomato will be some type of tomato kind of thing.
Hopefully.
Well,
I mean, it is Walmart. So.
It's a good way to save seeds. Let me say that. I did do a video on that a while back, and I think it's a viable way to save seeds. I know people who do it all the time. They save the pepper seeds from their peppers that they bought from the store. They regrow it, and they grow pepper. They do it with apples. Of course, apple trees from seed are going to take extremely long, and they aren't going to be the original variety that you bought it from. But, something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, let me get down.
We've got seeds from Walmart that are 2-3 years old, and we don't even think about it when we're planting. We just throw them in there, and if we got them, we use them. And
yeah, exactly.
Half the seeds, sometimes the seeds don't work regardless where you get them. They just don't grow. So
the germination rate will always decline after a certain period of time. Like if you throw out 100 seeds, maybe only 50 will germinate. Heck, that's pretty good though. Still, keep those 50 alive. You'll be good. Let's see.
You do quite a bit of gardening, don't you?
Yeah, doing gardening now. So I'm doing it in container gardens this year, and it's going really well. But it's always a learning process when you're in a different area, and especially if you're doing it, from a different type of way that you were doing it before, kind of thing. And so it's all a learning process. But every single year, gardening is going to be something a little bit different. With weather or pests or our fertilizer shortage that we're having right now, but yeah, the fertilizer shortages thing, that is getting really bad. But the thing about that is there's so many natural fertilizers that you don't need to buy fertilizer. Like you can, get, chicken poo and, cow poo. You can compost your scraps. I'm reading a book right now by David the Good. I don't know if you guys know him. I love his books. He's so out of the box picture gardening. He does a bunch of permaculture, and he does a lot of gardening in Florida. So like he builds these food forests, and like he is amazing. He's just the best. And he talks about composting, where you literally just take the scraps from your off your plate or whatever, and you just throw it on the ground. That's how you compost. Like you're not putting it in a bin, you're not doing this, you're literally just putting it in the ground, and then that's where it's going to compost down in.
Makes sense.
Yeah, we've got out here, we've got our horses and we got the chickens, so we've got a bunch of compost makers. It's funny with the chickens, since we've had them, the ground level is probably raised 5 or 6 inches, and I dug down the other day, and it's like black. I mean, it's beautiful dirt. Nice. I mean, if that it probably makes sense to people who garden, but I saw that and I was like, whoa, man, that's like gold.
that is gold, straight up gold right there. Yeah, that's great. And I know that some, people know farms around them. If you don't produce this stuff yourself, go to farms, and they probably have an abundance of this stuff that you could either pay for or trade for or, work for or whatever. You can get this stuff from them. So,
yeah. Hey, somebody was talking about fishing too in the chat a little while ago, and that reminded me of when I was younger, before I met Lisa, and before when I didn't have the priorities I have these days. I'll just put it that way. But I used to go fishing all the time. That used to be dinner. Like if I didn't catch food, I wasn't eating, because I was too busy spending money on beer and stuff like that when I was younger to actually pay for food. So, but that's stuff like that. Also, those different things that you can do to kind of supplement what you're going to be spending at the grocery store is a good idea. And getting that stuff that is that's really shelf stable, really inexpensive, because at some point, you may not be able to afford the expensive stuff anymore. But I think figuring out ways to, get your own without having to go to the Walmart, the grocery store, or whatever.
Yeah. Those local resources are going to be huge. Your neighbors, your local farms, just your local community. There are community gardens all over the place. I was saying, hey, even in the city, you can compost. Even in the city, there are community gardens. Even in the city, there's, a local farm that's 20, 30 minutes away or whatever, not that far. Just do some searches on the internets, and you will find, a ton of places. I guarantee it, no matter where you live. Okay, this is a good question. Oh, wait. I want to go to that fishing question. I just thought it was that. I lost it. Y'all are talking.
That's a good question too, though.
Well, that's a good question.
Struggled to go back to basics to fight for survival. Is it wrong? I know there's more to it and hardship, but I feel like starting over is the only hope we have.
That's a huge double-edged sword, right? Like here in the U.S., we have it so fortunate, and sometimes it doesn't seem that way. I spent about a little bit over a decade living in war zones all around the world. And when you see people to go to the store, like in a developed, somewhat like Iraq or some parts of Afghanistan, when I was in Pakistan, some of those places, you see people go to the market in what's a developed world, and they risk like getting blown up where, a marketplace at one area I was working in was hit, and it killed 130 people that were out getting food. And, these are moms and stuff they're shopping. So every time you go out, dad goes, mom leaves somewhere, the kids go somewhere, whatever it is, they risk getting annihilated. And it's not like just your random traffic accidents, like literally a kinetic event of bad people trying to do stuff to other people. Mm-hmm. So there's that. So living in like countries where civil war was, it's horrible. Everybody's affected by it. Gas lines, it's a nightmare. So wanting it, I understand that, because as a prepper, it's like, I'm ready. I got all this stuff. I don't think anybody, unless you have you have a bunker under like an ICF home with a freezer stocked and like that you've gone all in and had the money to go in it. I don't think anybody's truly ready for an event like that. Like the level of, in South Sudan, I remember sitting there as the rain was coming down in a monsoon and watched a lady who had flip-flops on her hands and duct tape to her knees because she had some sort of problem. She couldn't stand up. Well, they don't have social programs there to help you out. And she had a rope with a burlap sack tied around her waist, and the burlap sack was dragging behind her. And she was crawling back from the store. She had to go to get something, and she's in like 3 inches of soupy mud. And that always reminds me, like, that's what the rest of the world's like. And that's what the world's like in places. Think about it now. We're having record heat waves. Well, if you end up in some sort of civil war, some sort of collapse, how many people are going to die from lack of air conditioning?
Yeah.
Right. Just on that. Then you move into all the other things. It would be such a cataclysmic event, especially for the United States and other developed countries, that I hope it never happens. I hope we get through this. But one of the problems that we have, I believe, is that our governments and the ruling structure, the elite, are using technology more and more to either keep tabs on us, to enslave us in some ways, just like with what they can do, all your stuff can be monitored. If anybody doesn't think that the NSA does not have the ability to monitor every transmission that goes out, everything you do on the internet, they have those abilities, right? Like, so,
it's not even that. They can just track you while you're just driving in your car. You could throw away your phone. You have no technology anywhere. They will literally, there's Morgan, there's Dale, there's Brian.
They can send a packet of a downloadable thing to your phone, and you don't even have to click on it anymore. Now, if they know your phone number, they can infect your phone. You don't even know it's happened, right? So the more the technology advances, the more ability the government has, I believe, to oppress people. So then what does that mean? Well, it either means we as a world and with our governments all decide, hey, we need to get on the same page and not use technology to empower the powerful. I don't see that happening. So I think the only two ways forward are either they use more and more technology to oppress us and to keep tabs on us and to say what we can say and monitor us and shut down anyone that opposes, or we have something that gets rid of all of our technology. Either way, I don't think it's a bright future on that.
Yeah, and that goes to the second part of the question of you feel like starting over is the only hope we have. I think it is. I mean, I think that there is no, they've given no indication that they feel like they need to. But if we keep continuing off of this cliff, I think that is literally the only hope we had. Or like Brian said, it gets so bad that we are, in the matrix, basically slaves and all that stuff. And we let them control us like that. I mean, the only hope is starting over. So it's a matter of when, but yeah, I agree with everything Brian said there. And I think I think we're past the point of no return. Honestly, where we go from here, I don't know. But the best days of the United States and maybe all over the world, I think those are behind us. And it's going to take a lot to get back to that.
I think we could get it back. I think we could come back to it, but I don't think it's going to happen without struggle.
There's hard times ahead and a lot of struggle and a lot of these things I think people think they're prepared for. But even if we're talking about like the food and like a war zone, things like this, that we're talking about the government controlling us and all these things, we're not even thinking about the fact of our mental capacity to even handle this stuff on a regular basis. I mean, if you look to the past of how people used to live without grocery stores, without electricity, without these things, it was a daily, I don't know. I mean, it wasn't necessarily a struggle because it was just kind of life for them, but it was like a daily, act of, constant work, a constant something has to be done all the time. And so, I don't think the majority of people are ready for that, to handle it mentally, physically, with your skills, with anything. And so, yeah.
I don't think people back then, it probably bothered them too much because that's what they were used to.
Right.
I think having to go back to that lifestyle now would, there would be a vast majority of the people would have no idea what to do. Yeah. And in the chat, JJ Pearson was saying there's nothing more valuable than being self-sustainable. That's exactly it. Be more as self-sufficient as you possibly can be. But I think a lot of people, kind of like they were, I mean, we can learn a lot. I know preppers say this all the time, but we can learn a lot from the Depression. People that back then just did things for themselves. I think if people had to do that these days, if they couldn't just order something from Amazon, if they couldn't go down to Walmart and get whatever they wanted, I don't think people would lose their minds. I don't think they'd know how to cope.
Well, and I think we have a different system now, right? Back then, in the Great Depression, you had cattle yards near every city. Right, they had local cattle they would slaughter because they didn't have the refrigeration, the ability to preserve stuff like we do now. Now, like, when you drive across Interstate 40 or Interstate 10, you hit certain parts of Texas and it stinks to high heaven, and there's cattle yards for miles with thousands and thousands and thousands of cows. So our meat and our food. Like cities, I think if we go down this path, are really going to experience a hardship. You know, I don't see how they come out of it. Again, growing up in Los Angeles and looking at and being away from there for years and going back and visiting once in a while, it's like, wow, that city's done. I mean, you look at, I was living in Las Vegas up till recently, and Las Vegas, they're running out of water. I mean, they have on the news, they show that the bodies that they're finding at the bottom of Lake Mead and stuff now, because the water level's gone so slow. Yeah. So I think the more and more that we've set, like we talked about earlier, we have this fragile system that we set up to feed this planet, where we've exceeded the ability of the planet to feed itself. When this, when we get this little hitch in the giddy up, it's going to be bad. And I think the cities are going to really suffer.
I think that community is going to be really, really, really important. Even if it's your friends and family and like a couple neighbors or something, a little bit of people, backing you and trying to help you, or you helping other people, that kind of thing. I think that will help a lot. Now, it's going to help those people that actually want to survive, that want to learn these things, that want to work as a team, that want to do, that want to bring back, society in its glory, or whatever they think they're doing. It's the people that actually, have the desire and to thrive, instead of just, steal and pillage and all these things. And we have to deal with those people as well. So, it's the community that's going to be super, super strong. I think
that's how society's been throughout history, right? Yep. I mean, you get the turds that are, the pillaging and all that stuff, but it does take that community. It takes people getting together and forming something, and, making something bigger where they can fend off the turds and, have the infrastructure to make sure the water cities are built around water sources and stuff. Rome with the aqueducts and all that. So you get those cities that have doctors, they have the general stores, they have the, back in the day when it was horses, maybe that'll be the future too, with farriers and I forget what liveries, is that what they call them, with the horses and stuff. But you build those cities, and it's the same thing when we're talking a really localized level. You get that community around you, your neighbors, the people that want to band together and try to get something done. And who knows what that looks like, but you are going to have you're always going to have the turds, and you're always going to have the people that want to get together and may not know they're preppers yet, but when it comes down to it, maybe we don't call it that at that point, but there'll be people helping each other out.
Right.
Yeah, for a lot of things, whether it's food security. I know if I had friends in South Africa, and that were farmers. Well, when their society kind of collapsed and shifted, the police forces out in the rural areas were decimated, and they didn't have any response. And there were people that would come out to the country and do like just these insane home invasions, torture people, kill them, take everything they had. So they put radios in everybody's houses, and they all monitor their radios. And the response force to a home and they fortified their house. And the response force to that is all their local friends and neighbors. They put a call out on the radio, and everybody brings their guns and they come running.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly like that. And I think with our society, the way it is now, with the way it's so big and so strained, and our basic security is being, I just did a video, but I'm going to say it here. Like, we have 2 million people in this city, let's say, and there are 2,000 police officers for 2 million people across it was like a 4,000 square mile city. Like, it doesn't make any sense that you're going to be protected by that amount of people, for that amount of space, for that amount of people. It doesn't make any sense. So it's just a whole, like, our system is so big, and there's so many people, and the smaller our communities are, and the smaller that we can take care of those communities and the people in those communities, the safer and more, what was I trying to say? The
more resilient.
Taken care of. Yeah, more resilient. Exactly. More resilient. Perfect.
Yeah. Well, Angry Prepper says there, like, where you on the post you have up, is water wars are coming soon. I mean, don't forget they changed water into a commodity, a tradable commodity, some years ago. And and so here you have all of these, especially out west, again, just being out in Vegas and then being in LA before, where They say they're for the environment, yet they don't turn off any of the buildings. So they're putting up more multifamily homes as fast as a cat can lick its ass. And what are they doing with all that stuff, right? Putting water. Everybody has to flush the toilet. Everybody needs to drink, and they're draining the water. At some point, those people who are investing in that are going to be able to make money off all those people by charging exorbitant rates for the water supply. And, and he's a good example. I mean, you had a big, push out from all the public agencies, firefighters that lost their jobs over the COVID, people that law enforcement and public safety that don't want to be around everywhere. Dale and I were talking the other night, I think, and it was,
why would you want to be?
Well, it's because people say, well, they're going to lock everybody down and they're going to do all this crazy stuff by having this authoritarian force that enacts martial law. We have 7 to 8 million, I think is what it is. If you take all public safety and throw in the FBI, the Park Service, any sort of law enforcement, public safety person, it's like less than 10 million people. Yeah. When I was working overseas, the entire military and everything they had involved couldn't lock Baghdad down. Right. And so the idea that 10 million people are going to be able to lock our country down. But at the same time, what that means is there's not going to be anybody there to help me. You got to help yourself. You have to set your own self up for success.
I think it's funny that the same people demonizing all these people are the same ones that feel like they're going to rely on them when something bad happens. And trust the government. What is that saying? If the government tells you there's nothing to worry about, you better start worrying.
Yeah.
They're going to do what they can, but there's not enough around. Plus, the way that cops and all that have been demonized, that number's getting smaller and smaller anyway. So,
right. Yeah.
Well, if when the Supreme Court ruled that they don't have a duty to protect you as an individual, and now you're telling cops, well, if you do try to protect that person, there's a chance you could lose your job, you can get sued, you can go to jail. I wouldn't rush out there and try to protect people at some point. And I think you see that happening. It's why the crime stats are going up. I mean, look at New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, when I was just out there visiting my father. It's horrible the amount of crime that's going on. I mean, he lives in a fairly decent area, and they're stealing catalytic converters by the truckload from out from underneath cars and selling them. Home invasions are going up, So yeah, I think it's a problem.
Yeah, this is a really big point here. I was helping a lady who I witnessed hit and run on her vehicle, and it took over 45 minutes for an officer to arrive. My mom was just stranded on the side of the road in a city. Populated city, people driving past her, right? And then they broke, their motorcycle broke or whatever. It took them 2 hours for somebody to come get them. They're in the middle of a city. 2 hours. It wasn't rush hour. There wasn't back-to-back traffic. 2 hours. Like, for real? Like, there's just no, they say that response time here in this city is, I think they said 6 to 10 minutes or something like that. And I'm like, well, I mean, where? What response to what? What are you responding to, nowadays? They're not even responding to a lot of things. Well, what did I hear the other day? That something was being pushed. I think it was domestic violence. Like, they're not even going to be I can't remember if it was here or somewhere else, that they're not even going to be responding to domestic violence anymore. Like, that they're just going to... they were going to up to somebody. Did you hear about that?
We'll show up to you. We'll show about that.
Yeah, they have to the angry prepper in the chat. I was looking through there. The chat skipped on me, but he's talking about how they prioritize calls, and that's what they were saying. These cops are like, we don't have the resources anymore, so we can't do this stuff. And it's keep listening to these stupid politicians that the ones that are causing all this stuff, and these activists that are doing all this stuff, and see how bad this stuff gets. But to your point with waiting 2 hours and all that, I think that's why a lot of us kind of have this mindset that we do that makes us want to get into this preparedness stuff, because it is that, okay, I'm going to call the cops, or I'm going to call these people and try to get the help I need. But while I'm waiting for them, who knows how long that's going to be, I'm going to try to figure this stuff out, whether that means calling somebody else, whether that means having the tools in your car to figure something out. All of these different things that we think about as preppers, and just people in general that kind of think about this stuff. It is that self-sufficiency, that being more as self-reliant as you possibly can without depending on these other people. And great, if the cops get there and help you out, then fantastic. But if you depend on that, good luck, I suppose. I mean, there's a lot of people that just think the government's there to save them. The cops are going to be there at their door when they need them, and they're going to, be disappointed when it doesn't turn out exactly like their little utopia going on in their mind.
Well, I think the thing is too, I remember like when he was talking about prioritizing calls, that's what they do. They triage, right? That's what we talk about in medicine, right? And so one of the things I think, even in the best of times, when I was a firefighter in Southern California and paramedic, our average response time was about 8 minutes to get to the scene. So you can die from lack of oxygen to your brain in 5 to 6 minutes. You can suffer irreversible brain damage a little bit less than that. If you have a massive hemorrhage that requires, say, a tourniquet or something like that, you can bleed out in about 2 to 3 minutes and die. Right. So even on the best of days, with the average response, even going across the street or just around a corner when we would get calls around the corner from the station, you're talking from the time the call went in to the time we got 3 houses away was probably 4 or 5 minutes.
Right.
And
where in the event is this happening? Did I call before, during, after?
Exactly.
When in the event did this happen? Yeah. Can I even call? So many.
You are your own first responder. Everybody should know first aid, right? Everybody should know CPR. Everybody should know how to stop the bleed, to put a tourniquet on, because those are the things that are really going to matter. And as we see, fire, EMS, law enforcement have a more difficult time doing their jobs. Eventually, this thing where the sheriff recently was saying, hey, we are deprioritizing calls because we can't afford the fuel to go to them.
Yeah.
Well, we have a parts. My father owns a diesel repair business. He's having a tough time getting parts to repair trucks. Right. Well, eventually that's going to blow into law enforcement, fire, EMS, and the people that we rely on, where now they won't have as many vehicles to get to where they need. Yeah. And there was time when I was a paramedic in Atlanta, there were times where I was the only responding unit available for the entire city of Atlanta. So people need to think about this, and it's only going to get worse before it gets better.
Go ahead.
What Angry Prepper was talking about too. Think about, not just the fuel prices. Think about how they're prioritizing because of that. And then on top of that, you get the shortages and you get the people running to the grocery store and all of that crap going down. And then then they're prioritizing that stuff. And then it's that domino effect of things that could happen. It's something that maybe it's not one big thing, but a bunch of these little things could add up to a lot of hassle depending on where you live and how close to the city you are. And I mean, a lot of different variables, but yeah, it could be to the point where the cops are just throwing their hands in the air saying, hey man, I can only do what I can do.
Here's another, I don't know if the Angry Pepper can actually answer this because he did fire, but I wonder if, what about because of luxury, I put this up because he said luxury communities, like with the gates and things like that, it's hard to get into some of these places, unless you know somebody, right? Obviously, that's the point. But what about fire and police? Do they have a special code? I'm honestly curious. Do they have a special code to get in?
Usually, they'll usually have a code, or if a lot of buildings, when you pull up to the front of a building, like the office buildings and stuff, they'll have a Knox box. It's called. It's a metal box mounted up, and you kind of got to make an effort to get to it. And the fire department usually has a key, and that has the keys to the building. And then you can go back to Uvalde and see that the cops couldn't make entry into the door. They didn't have, every police car or every sergeant's car should have a breaching kit in it, but they had to wait to figure out the keys to get into the door. So again, you run into this problem of there was a situation where that should have happened and it didn't happen. So hope for the best, but plan for the worst.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Let me get some of these questions here. We veered off a little bit on shortages and inflation, but I love the discussion.
That's what usually happens with us. Dale writes out hey, here's some stuff we're going to talk about in the show. And usually that's blown out of the water about the first 5 minutes when we get on.
Yeah. So. I'll get this list of this whole topics, what we're going to talk about and all this. And if it veers off course, then we start driving that way. And if it veers back somehow, we'll go back down that road. But yeah, who knows? That's how our show goes.
I know. So people always ask me, what are we going to talk about? I'm like, we'll find things to talk about. Don't even worry about it. And the whole episode usually veers off just like this. And I love it. But this is all great stuff, but this is all coming back to, I think, what I really wanted to convey, what all three of us wanted to really convey is that self-reliance. Now, you won't be 100% self-reliant. You know, we do still need the community and your locals and things like that, but you know, learn the skills, prep the food, learn to grow a garden, find your local, you know, natural sources, learn to hunt and fish and wild forage and all these things that can help us, you know, get by. And you know, I mean, that's really the basics to all these shortages, inflation, and everything. It's the skills and the knowledge and our preps that are going to get us by.
Yeah, I think you hit the head on the nail on the head with the resilience of as far as a community or a group of friends. You know, that is 100% spot on. And what I want, one of my things that I see in like different prepper groups and stuff is everybody looks like, well, you're former special operations person. Like, look for like these really big resumes. And my view on that, because I've done that. That was part of my life years ago, and I look at that as like, that doesn't buy you much.
Right.
Like, being a security person is great. Having a security mindset is great. Knowing how to shoot, move, and communicate is great. But everybody, when it comes to that resilient community, plays an equal role in making that happen. There are going to be people that you think are going to be great when the chips are down and you have a really hard event going on, that are going to crumble, and other people are going to rise up and like, wow, I didn't think, you know, John Boy over there was going to do all that. So don't discount people. I like to say that preppers, we're not Dungeons and Dragons characters that we sit down, roll up some stats, and we assign a couple, like, you're the healer, you're the fighter, and you're all this. That's not what we are. And everybody brings something to the table. It's just you need to go in and figure out what that is and what they have to offer and how to make that work.
For sure.
I'll tell you what, though, just from knowing you, my wife Lisa being the nurse, you having that military experience, the firefighter experience, the EMT, all that stuff, I've learned. Because basically I'm Joe Schmo, right? I'm the average prepper, just the guy that wants to get stuff together. And, you know, I've learned a whole bunch from Brian. I've learned a whole bunch from Lisa, wound care and all of that stuff. And I think that's what we need to do. And it does take all those different types of people, those different types of skill sets to get that stuff done, because nobody can do it by themselves. So I think it is important to have that stuff.
I was just asking in our in the member Discord on my membership site, on the Discord, you know, like, I was thinking about farmers, like, what would you trade farmers for? You know, like, if you wanted something of theirs, like, you know, because you always think of farmers are pretty self-sufficient. Like, what the heck am I going to give you, you know, that you want? And the basic things that came to mind were maintaining the property, so fixing things, you know, helping with the animals, you know, helping with the garden, you know, fixing things, you know, general things, whatever. Help, labor. And so, you know, if you can get little knowledge on those little things, you know, how to fix things, how to grow things, how to tend to things, you know, how, you know, a little bit of animal care. Even if you don't have animals, you can get books or read up on it. You can watch YouTube videos, do all these things that you can at least try to get some sort of basic understanding of it. You know, and then when the time comes, you could be like, well, you know, I have a basic understanding, blah, 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 you know, try to plead your case. But what I'm saying is, you know, just try to get all that knowledge as much as possible, and, you know, try to practice it as best you can. You know, I bet there are local farms that would even let you, you know, help out now, you know, just, you know, volunteer, intern, you know, farms always need help, you know, go spend a summer or something, you know, helping out, getting those skills.
Well, I think it's going to be a lot of sweat equity. If you look back, if the economy tanks, like, I mean, you can go look at Peter Schiff, a bunch of other people, and a lot of people that I follow are all saying the same thing. Look, we injected all this money into the economy. The knuckleheads at top aren't doing anything to ratchet down the spending, and basically we're going to have to crater the economy to get out of this in a lot of ways. So if you think about, like, okay, when was the last time in U.S. history, if you go back to the Great Depression kind of thing, what was it that a lot of people did to eat that were struggling? They drove west to California out Route 66 and they became field workers. Right. So what do farmers need? Probably need some sweat equity. Right. You know, that kind of stuff. So one of the things I think in the preparedness community that a lot of us miss is being in as good a shape as we can be in. The apocalypse isn't easy. There's a reason when I was working as a security contractor overseas in the military, like, We all had PT tests that we had to do. Now, I'm not saying that, like, look, the average prepper's in their 40s and older. So, you know, you've gotten banged up by life. It's not that easy to do, but try to go out and walk.
Yeah.
Get in shape so you're walking. Try to ratchet your diet down. Maybe, you know, if you got a blood sugar problem, you got diabetes, try to ratchet down. Get that sugar down. Start, you know, I like to talk about it because it's kind of the people think it's a little bit foo-foo, but I talk about intermittent fasting. You know what more people do? They intermittent fast out of necessity, not because they want to, but set yourself up for understanding, like, yeah, maybe I might have to go longer in between meals. What does that look like? Plan on that now. Maybe it's just I have a cup of coffee for breakfast, a light lunch, and a decent dinner every day. And that stretches, how far does that stretch our food stuff? But have those plans now. Think about that stuff through. We all talk about situational awareness, John Boyd, the OODA loop. Think about that stuff now, because that's feeding your OODA loop. It's feeding your situational awareness for what's coming down the road and how you're going to deal with problems you might run into.
That's actually my meal plan. I literally have coffee, a little lunch, and then I have a pretty big dinner. Like, and you know, I have snacks in between if there's snacks or whatever. But that's literally my meal plan. And people always give me such crap for it. You got to eat in the morning. I'm like,
no. The eating in the morning thing is an American thing, man. We invented this big breakfast thing, and you don't necessarily. We're very accustomed to it. Emotionally, we're very accustomed to it. Our brain goes down the superhighway. I wake up in the morning. Something's wrong if I don't have my breakfast. And it's kind of where we are with everything, where people suffer from normalcy bias. We all do. It's part of the human condition. And so why are so many people still wandering around, going to parks, acting like nothing's happening? Someone in the chat a long time ago, so I don't know that you'll find it, mentioned it earlier, was we're in an SHTF event now.
Yeah.
5 years ago, if you went to the market and you saw shortages on the shelves, like, oh my gosh, what is this? Well, we had shortages 2 years ago when COVID first started going around. They started doing lockdowns. The shortages have gotten worse. So the idea that we're not in it, we just are, maybe it stops, but we're in the early stages of an SHTF event across, like we talked about, complex disasters across all of different industries, society, everywhere. Things are not working well right now. So we are in that.
Really, yeah, you're right. It's really obvious things are not working. I mean, if the news cycle is telling us anything, yes, news is very sensationalized, true, but
more than ever.
Yes, but we do have to look at patterns as well. You know, we have to look down to the deep truth of you know, how often are we seeing these things? And like recently, like a tampon shortage came up, and I'm like, really? You asked me, like, is somebody just standing there spinning a wheel? What should we do next, guys?
Sriracha chili shortage.
Let's go.
Saltine cracker shortage.
Yeah, the sriracha chili shortage. That's it. That's really going to get them. That is going to fuel our society to really hate us. Yeah.
I will say, though, the tampon thing, that's a little bit more concerning than saltine crackers or sriracha chilies. You know, for some people,
especially if you're a woman.
Yeah, that's probably a big deal. You know, the baby formula, stuff like that. Sriracha chilies, I think we can do without. But
you know, if they do run out of
that, you're gonna people are gonna come here and start harassing me about this. Well, damn that. Sriracha wasn't important.
On the good side, if they do run out of tampons, maybe we could stop hearing preppers talk about stuffing tampons in the bullet holes. That'd be a good way forward.
Thank you. Yes, that would be wonderful, wouldn't it? It'd be a dream. Okay. But actually, I do want to talk about the tampons just a minute. There's so many ways that I just don't care about this tampon shortage. Although the shortage is concerning, the actual tampons being out, I don't really care, because there are cups and you can make your own pads and all these things. I mean, people used to put grass, used to use grass. Like, and moss, they used to use these things, they used whatever, like, it doesn't, like, people seriously think.
Was that in like was that in the Hobbit that they were doing that?
No, that was like a couple years ago. No, I'm kidding. I don't know. Like, I read it somewhere, like what
there was,
used to use.
There was civilization before there was Tampax, so they had to do something.
I don't think so.
I think the important point, though, is like you've talked about sriracha, saltine crackers, all these different shortages. Every one of those taken in isolation, like, okay, the baby food, like, all right, we had, our government let one company basically get a monopoly because that government was probably getting kickbacks from that company and their lobbyists and all that. We can understand and rationalize that one. Right. But when you start having shortage after shortage after shortage, it's an industry wide. It's a consumer-wide problem that's happening. And the more we go, I haven't watched, maybe the mainstream media doesn't want to put out there, but I haven't seen any reports come out anywhere of, hey, this shortage is over, everything's great to go. I haven't seen the end of a shortage yet. It's just more shortages and more shortages. And there's enough mainstream news out there where they really want to help Biden and they want to support the establishment. So they would come out and say, look, we solved this problem. Not a peep.
No. And it's one shortage after another. And some shortages just continue. Like they're not. And, you know, shortages sometimes take a little bit to catch up too. Like, you know, the coffee shortage and inflation. And you know right about the coffee? So last summer.
Serious.
It was last summer. It was last July. And coffee did raise in price. I haven't seen like a shortage necessarily, but I did see some inflation of it just because there was like the crops got I think they got what, I can't remember what happened. Something happened with the crops, but anyway, but yeah. So, and then I think that took like a few months to catch up, you know, like some things like you'll hear, you know, there's going to be a wheat shortage. There's going to be this. And then people are like, oh, cool. Okay. And then they don't do anything about it. So, or they do something about it. They go really hard right then. And then they totally forget about it down the line. And then, you know, they realize maybe they didn't do enough or something like that. And so prepping is a consistent thing. It's not, you know, it's not like doing it hard, and then you're done. It's just like doing that little bit, you know, all the time. I'm preaching to the choir here, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's important for people to remember too. One other thing is, as we go farther down this route of food shortages, a lot of preppers having stuff stocked in their cupboards, and I imagine are stocking up. Watch out, because remember when coronavirus first started, and I think it was like late February or March of 2020 when they started accusing people of hoarding toilet paper.
Yeah.
Right. And that was all, oh, these people have all this toilet paper stocked up. Yeah. Well, they remember, they will demonize you really quick if it suits their needs. About the people in charge, whoever's running will demonize you really quick if you have what other people don't, especially when other people don't have anything. When they're not able to feed their kids, you're a bad person for having something that they don't.
My husband just told me a story of this, of these parents that, they had a preemie child and they needed specific formula for that preemie. And so at the time he was just like, I'm just going to buy it. Like they needed it for a year. They needed to feed their child this specific formula for a year. So he was like, I'm just going to buy a year supply. This was before the formula shortage and crisis and all that. And so he bought up, you know, whatever he needed for a full year. And, you know, formula has a year shelf life. So he was like, it just seems like the smart thing to do to, you know, get whatever formula I need for my child, you know, for the whole year. And so apparently they were having a dinner party and one of his friends saw it and they were like, you know, how dare you stock up on this? You should be giving this formula to less needy families or people that can't have it, that kind of thing. That is the mentality of people who see that we did this, you know, before any of this happened, and we had the forethought to do this. We put a lot of time, money, effort into this. They're going to see this stuff and they're going to be like, no, you need to give this away to other people that don't have it. We've been telling everybody for so long, you know, to get prepared, to see the signs. And, you know, if you want to help, that's your prerogative. But like, it's nobody's responsibility to save, you know, the world, to give what you got to other people. It's just not. And if you want to, that's
I
fine.
call that prepper hate. I think that's something that is actually real, that in a situation like that, we're going to have to deal with from friends and family, mainly the people that know what we're doing. Because that's just the American mentality. What, you know, you have, so I should have. That's not fair. They don't factor in the fact that they didn't do a damn thing for, you know, the last decade or so. They just factor in the here and now, and it's not fair that you've got all this stuff, and we don't know that this is going to last a year, so you're not going to need all that stuff. I call it prepper hate, and it's actually something we do need to think about, and that's why that OPSEC and all of that comes into play when you're talking about who knows what you're doing and all that. Meanwhile, we're here on YouTube spouting off to the world.
Oh yeah,
you know.
Well, I mean, it sounds like that person needs to do a better job of selecting who they have over their house and as friends, because obviously that was an error in judgment right there. But I think it always happens in society. Again, when there's problems, If somebody has it easier than others, you're going to be the bad person out of the bunch, and they're going to want your stuff. You know, I don't know what that looks like. Are they going door to door? I don't know. I'm not going down that road. I just know I focus on the human nature side of it. And
they will, period.
Yeah.
Well, and there's always like coworkers, those people that you don't necessarily think of as close friends or anything like that. But you know, I mean, I can think of 4 or 5 off the top of my head that, God forbid they come over here if something happens. But those people that you just know are going to be a pain in your butt when something like that happens. And it's, you know, those are the people you hold your cards close to your vest with, because you don't want anything, them knowing anything about anything, and all of a sudden they pop up at your front door, and you're like, oh great, here we go.
Well, and thinking through that now, thinking through if people come to my house, family, close family, or friends that I don't have the ability to support, but I have some stuff, how am I going to deal with that? Like, literally thinking through that now, rather, a lot of people dismiss it out of hands. Like, oh, I'll just tell them to go away, or I'll do this, or it's really easy to say at times when times aren't hard and you don't have that emotional person that you may have a strong emotional bond with, or maybe not. But how are you going to turn them away? What does it look like if they come back? Like, what does that all look like? Thinking through some ways that you might deal with that now, because it could be coming in 6 months, 9 months, maybe even sooner.
Obviously it already is, and especially, with the toilet paper, it happened then. I saw tons of comments on like prepper, blogs or whatever, like, how dare you, have all this stuff, you should be giving it away. I've already been seeing this stuff. Now, there also is the line of the people who say that stuff online, and then there's the line of the people who are actually going to go do it, instead of, are they going to go take it? Are they going to grovel at your feet for it? What are they going to do? So like there's a lot of talkers too, but we can't, underestimate anyone. Absolutely. You always have to, like you're saying, you have to have those. You have to think about that stuff and how you're actually going to handle it on a case-by-case basis, and depending on who it is, like, is it a complete stranger? Is it a family member? Is it a close friend? Who is it that's saying this stuff? And it's all case by case, but how are you going to handle things for sure?
Yep.
Yeah, and it's something we're bound to face regardless of how much foresight we put into it and how much thought we put into it beginning. Yeah. It's something we're bound to face, and who knows when, why, how, and all that. And as preppers, we kind of fall into this thought process of worst case scenario. Sometimes it may not be worst case scenario. So it's not, we've talked about this a bunch of times. It's not all the time you're turning somebody away or anything like that. It really is case dependent, but that's one of those variables. I mean, there's just so many different things to think about with all of this stuff that it's hard to say one way or another whether you're going to make this choice or that choice. You just don't know.
Right. Exactly. You just don't know. Desperate people, no food for a few days. Desperate people do desperate things. So.
Yeah, and then what is there? Is there a light at the end of the tunnel? Are you going to have that option to maybe help them out a little bit, or is this something that who knows? I mean, there's just a lot of different variables.
Yeah, exactly. If you want to help, that's totally fine. If you have the extra stuff or just want to, whatever, that's totally fine. Nobody's telling you not to.
One of the things
when you say no, they're going to come burn your house down.
Right.
Well, one of the things I've tried to do over time, because I mean, as you get older as a prepper, eventually you get more and more prepared just by, we buy stuff and we accumulate stuff. So I got to the point where once I said, all right, I'm pretty good on food for myself. Let me plan for, my father who's not a prepper. There's people in life who bring a great value who I want around. So, okay, let me stock up for him or other people. And maybe if you have the means, try to do that over time, eliminate that. But again, with way we're heading, it's very likely you may have that tough question put to you.
Yep. Yeah. I know one of my friends, she just sent her daughter like a whole bunch of preps. Like she told her daughter, I'm going to send you a bunch of stuff. And her daughter probably thought like she's getting like a tiny little box or something. But she sent her like 3 months worth of food and like all these supplies. And her daughter was like, what is this? But she was super grateful and happy for it. And, I mean, if you have the means to do that, to help out your friends and family too, just give them like little, prepper gift boxes and things, hope that it comes in handy one day for them. So.
Now you've moved twice recently, right? In the last year or two. I moved across the country once with all my prepper stuff. I actually had to fly back and rent another truck and move it the second time to get my prepper stuff. I had so much stuff. Did you run into the same problem where you just have so much stuff that it was a pain to move?
You know what? I don't like making multiple trips. So like, and I've moved across the country a few times,
Yeah.
so I always kind of had to downsize, and it always made me sick. But when I downsized, I always gave it to people that I knew was going to use it. So like I got rid of some food to, my local neighbors that they came over and they just got what they wanted. They loved it and it was great. So I felt good, about my preps going to people that I knew were actually going to use it. And I remember giving like a whole tote of like gear to this one person who was just starting to prep when I moved like, a few years ago or something. And he was just so grateful. And I bet he's still using it to this day, I'm okay downsizing as long as I know I'm kind of giving it to somebody that's really gonna like it, So yeah, it's tough though. It's tough to get rid of that stuff, but I know that I can get it back, that kind of thing. And with the food and stuff, I've always been able to like get that supply right back up. And I don't get rid of some food, some food I never ever get rid of, but it kind of depends on what it is. Rambling now.
It's interesting to the average person. It's probably like a gold mine, or like, look at all this stuff.
Right.
And to you, it's a small portion. To preppers, it's like, that's not a lot.
Right.
I'm giving you a couple weeks worth of food.
Enjoy it. My treat. Yeah. So leave us with the last thought here. Teach a man to fish and he'll sit in your boat and drink all your beer. So on that, don't
That's
bring
a good bumper sticker right there.
I like it. Well, thank you so much, guys, for being on. We're about an hour and a half here, so I figure I'll let you go. But thank you all so much for being here, for everybody watching, and for Brian and Dale here. If you don't know, I'm going to put their link is actually, I don't know if the link is already, but I'm going to put the link in the description right now. I'm pretty sure I already put it in, but when I do this, it gets complicated. Anyway, okay. So if you don't know already, do head over to their various sites and things and check them out. And you guys have anything else to say?
No, I had a good time. It's always fun to sit here and talk with you. I knew this is kind of the direction it was going to go. We actually stuck to a lot of food and shortages type stuff and didn't go too far down the side road. So it turned out pretty good, but it's fun. A lot of great information, regardless of, what the show topic was supposed to be.
Right. Agreed.
Yeah, no, appreciate it. Yeah, everybody, if everybody can, check us out over at the Survivor or the Survival Preppers YouTube channel. And I have the Mind for Survival podcast, number 4, Survival.
Perfect.
Yeah, and we also have the Survival Preppers podcast as well.
Oh, that's true.
For those people that want to listen to the audio version and all of that. So,
and
yeah,
and just to make sure everybody knows, we I do not keep it this calm usually over there. I usually have rants and I spit and I drop I carpet bomb Berlin with F-bombs over there. So
yeah, sometimes I'm usually the S-bombs and he's the S-bombs. And sometimes, depending if we're talking about Biden or politics or something, put on your earmuffs because it gets rough over there sometimes.
Thank you for keeping it clean on here. I try to keep my channel clean, but I always tell my guests it's okay to be yourself. No worries, right? But thank you. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thanks, Morgan.
Thank you all so much for being here.
Morgan.
Thank you all so much for watching, and conquer tomorrow by preparing today. Talk to you later. Bye.